Hey there, welcome back to the channel everybody. You're watching Outdoors with this guy. My name is Don, and here lately I've been getting quite a few comments and questions asking about my four-way wedge on my log splitter, how I had it customized, and where I got it and everything. And then also I've had a few questions about the log splitter itself, so in this video we're going to go over all those things and hopefully get some questions answered for you guys. I guess for starters, we'll start with how I store it here on the log splitter. This is just a piece of pipe here I had laying around, and I welded it onto the axle slash reservoir tank for the hydraulic oil. Just put a couple little tack welds on both sides, didn't get too carried away. It's just to hold the wedge on there, keep it from bouncing off, you know, when I'm pulling the splitter around in the yard or whatever. So this pipe here measures 3 inches on the outside diameter, and like I said, it's just what I had laying around, and it just so happens that the wedge fits right on there really nicely, so that's where I store it. You do have to take this off, or I have to take this off whenever I go to raise the log splitter up into the vertical position, because with this wedge on the pipe like that, when these hoses come forward, they do hit that and rub on the wedge. So just something I always have to kind of keep in mind there. But anyways, that's how I store the wedge when I'm not using it. Okay, I guess the next thing I need to go over is when I first got this wedge. Again, I bought this 4-way wedge at Tractor Supply. And when I first got home with it, went to put it on the log splitter, it wouldn't just slide over my wedge here, because these gussets here that hold the wedge onto the cylinder ram, the metal was up from here up at an angle to here on both sides. So I just took a 4-inch grinder and I cut here and here on both sides there and got rid of those, and now the wedge will slide right over and fit on there nicely. So that was the first thing I had to do to get the 4-way wedge to work on my log splitter for me. I also had a question about the actual size of my wedge on my log splitter. Whether, you know, if they have different sized wedges between a 22 ton like this log splitter, a 25 ton, or, you know, like a 40 ton or whatever. So I believe that 4-way wedge from Tractor Supply was for their 25 ton log splitters. Again, my log splitter is just a 22 ton, but I'll go ahead and measure this wedge out for you here. It measures across the top. The full width is exactly 3 inches, and then from the back of the wedge to the front of the wedge here measures 6 1/4 inches. So hopefully that helps you guys as to whether or not you think that wedge is going to work for you or not. So I guess I could also measure from the back here to here. The wedge part of it is, I'll call it 3 1/4 inches, and then the narrow end of the wedge here, we will measure that, and I'm getting right at 3 inches there. So then the overall height of my wedge is 7 inches. So hopefully that helps some of you guys there. Now these bumpers here, or that's what I call them, as bumpers. I don't really know what they're actually called. Whenever you're splitting a log, and let's say your wedge gets hung in it, you retract your wedge back, and these bumpers will catch the log as the wedge continues to come back, and it pulls the wedge out of the log for you. Very handy. They used to be, I don't know, about that tall probably, I'm gonna guess. Now when I had this 4-way wedge customized with the bigger wings, obviously those bumpers were too tall and in the way, and you couldn't get the wedge on there. So I took one of my concrete saws, my quickie saw, and I drew me a line on here and whacked those things off there to to where you can now put the wedge on there, as you just seen me do, and it fits on there real nice. It doesn't touch these at all, and the bumpers are still useful for whenever you get the wedge stuck in a log. You can still retract it. There's still a bumper there for the log to hit to get the wedge out of the log you're splitting. So I actually have a video where I cut these off, and I think it was the very first time I ever used the four-way wedge with the new wings on it, and I believe that video is titled Log Splitter Mods. So if you want to go back and check that video out, I have done a video on the four-way wedge already. Just didn't really get into too much information as far as the measurements and all that. So now for the actual four-way wedge wings. Again, this is a four-way wedge, slides on over top your log splitter wedge. Bought it at Tractor Supply. I think it was around $50 or something like that. I had it for several months and used it the way it was when I bought it, and it worked okay. It would split the real small logs into 4 pieces fine. You put anything, you know, bigger than 6 inches on the log splitter, and it had trouble splitting all the way through. You know, it would definitely split your wood in half sideways, just not, these two wouldn't quite get split apart from one another all the way. So it actually in a way was slowing me down rather than making, you know, the process faster. So I took it to my cousin's welding shop, and originally it had the little short wings on here. I don't remember how wide those were. I'm gonna guess they were somewhere around 2.5 inches, something like that. And I wanted him just to add on to the existing wings a piece here, and then weld a gusset across the back of all of it as he's done here. And he said okay. Well, whenever he called me and he said the wedge was done, I went and picked it up. He said, hey, instead of welding onto the old existing wedge, he just cut the whole thing off and made brand new wedge pieces for both sides, and then cut some gussets here and welded on the back. And this is just flat metal back here. He used looks like it's 1/4 inch thick back here, what he used for the gusset. And then what he built this wedge out of here is 5/8. It's 5/8 of an inch thick. And then he I'm not quite sure how he did it or what tools he used, but he put a beveled edge on the top side. And he was a little bit worried about his beveled edge not working very good. It's worked fine. It's never gave me any troubles. So that's what he did there. Now, how wide is each wing now? 6 inches exactly. Both sides are 6 inches. And then the entire wedge itself here is right at 7.5 inches. If you remember, the log splitter wedge itself was I think we measured it at 7. Yeah, 7 inches. So we're just a little bit taller now, and each wing is 6 inches wide. So you're 12 inches wide all the way through now. And you know, you can split some pretty big rounds, and this thing don't have a problem doing it. You know, I'm usually splitting wood that's pretty easy to split. You know, ash, oak. Now I have split quite a bit of hickory with this four-way wedge too, and it does just fine through the hickory as well. So I don't think I've split any elm with it. Not with the four-way wedge, I don't think. But anyways, guys, that's kind of it, I think, as far as the four-way wedge goes. If I missed anything on it, feel free to comment below and ask me any questions you have on it. I'll try to answer them the best I can for you. I guess that's about it. There is one thing I was just thinking, and I almost forgot to mention it. I was thinking about it the other day. One thing, if you guys are interested in, you know, getting one of these built or having one made, there is one thing I would do different, and that is, I would set these wings back just a little bit, maybe only an inch back, you know. So if this cutting edge of this wing maybe was back in here somewhere, I think I would do that if I were to do this over again. Just because right now when you go to split wood, that wedge, that wedge, that wedge, and that wedge, they're all going in and touching the wood at the same exact time. So I think it would be easier for this log splitter to push this 4-way wedge through the log if these wings set back here, like I said, just about an inch, to get this cutting edge into the log and get started, so that way your log's already starting to crack and split sideways, and then these two wedges come along, like I said, about an inch behind your leading edge, and start to split the log into the 4 pieces. So if I could change one thing about this, that's what I would change. Now for the log splitter itself, this is a Country Tough 22 ton. I bought this log splitter at Orscheln Farm and Home. I would say this log splitter is basically the same thing as a county line that you would get from your Tractor Supply. I don't know if they make a 22 ton. I think the smallest ones I've seen is a 25 ton. But like I said, I got the wedge from Tractor Supply, the 4-way wedge, and had to do some customizing, but I got it to fit on there fine, and it works great. So, you know, if somebody else had a log splitter that's not a county line, I'm sure you can probably get the wedge to fit. Like I said, I gave you the measurements of my splitting wedge on my log splitter, and the 4-way wedge from Tractor Supply fits over it just fine now. Like I said, I did have to do a little grinding on the gussets on the back side of it to get it to slide over it. Okay, so we went over quite a few things so far. I think I'm starting to wrap this up as far as most of the questions go. There's one thing about this log splitter that I have never liked since day one of owning it, is when you set a log on here, the smaller ones are worse than the big ones, but the big ones do it too. The sides of this log splitter, where it curves around here on both sides to guide that plate down here at the bottom of the splitting wedge, when you go to run the wedge through a piece of wood and that wood's trying to split, it sets down in here too far and it hits up against those, and it won't let the wood split apart the way the wedge is trying to split it apart. So in a lot of videos you'll see me using this 4-way wedge, and I start to go forward through the log, and all of a sudden I have to stop and back up a little bit, and then go back forward, and stop and back up a little bit, and then go back forward. And it's not because the log splitter don't have enough power to push the 4-way wedge through the log. That's not it at all. What's happening is, like I said, the wedge is going through the wood, and the wood's trying to spread apart, but it's hitting these sides, and it won't let it split apart. So by backing this up and running the 4-way wedge backwards, once the wedge is in the wood and it's going through, by backing up, it takes a little pressure off, and it kind of picks that log up a little bit, and then go forward again, and it usually will pick that wood up enough to get it up above those sides, and then the wood will go ahead and be able to split apart like it's supposed to. The reason I know that it's not the log splitter having trouble pushing the wedge through, it's these sides, is because I have a buddy of mine. He has a 22 ton log splitter as well, and I put this 4-way wedge on his log splitter, and his is just a straight I-beam on top. It don't have these sides, okay? And he can split some really gnarly wood with this 4-way wedge way easier than I can on mine, because his don't have those sides like mine does, and his wood can spread apart the way that the wedge is trying to split it apart. These bumpers don't allow my wood to split apart. Even without the 4-way wedge, just the regular wedge, you still run into the same problem. You know, because The problem ain't with the four-way trying to split the wood up like this. It's this wedge here trying to split the wood sideways. Those won't let the wood split sideways, and so if I could change anything about this log splitter, it would be to get rid of those sides somehow. I'm not sure. I've looked at some of the county line log splitters, the newer ones, and it looks like they've kind of fixed that problem somewhat. It looks like these are, instead of being bent and rolled over, it looks like they're kind of down at an angle and then go flat, and it looks like it holds the log up a little better rather than the log setting down inside of it like mine is here. So anyways, not a huge problem, but it is kind of aggravating sometimes. Alright guys, well that's going to do it for this video. I hope I got everybody's answers to them, and if I missed any questions or anything, please leave a comment down below, and I'll try to get back with you as soon as I can and get those questions answered for you. So I appreciate you guys watching. If you would please hit that like button, click subscribe, share this video with a friend, and we will see you guys in the next one. Take care.